The 1901 panel is another one that's one of our lesser-known stories, but very significant story in Alabama. Frances Griffin in the panel is addressing the all-male legislature about women's lack of voting rights at the time.
She really had become the face of the suffrage movement in Alabama by 1901, and she had developed a following, really. She was known nationally for being a great speech giver.
They didn't want her to speak. There were some men that were against her speaking. She'd been a teacher in that community for many years, but she had taught many of these people that were sitting in front of her. She had also taught many, many young ladies. So when they found out that she was going to speak, they all showed up.
She just gets almost a cult following of people who come to hear her give speeches. And so she puts out the word on Friday afternoon that she's going to be speaking Monday at the Constitutional Convention, and the gallery is packed with women.
Hundreds of these women showed up, dressed to their nines, and they flooded the chambers. There wasn't anywhere for them to sit, so they went on the upper deck.
There are several men who say no. They don't want her to speak, and they're very vocal about it.
She raises a rhetorical question. Do you think women aren't intelligent enough to be a part of the political process? And the response was laughter in the gallery.
So John Knox calls a hand vote, a show of hands. You have to show, do you want her to speak or do you not? And all of a sudden, only one delegate from Dallas County was the only one who actually would raise his hand to say no, he didn't want her to speak. And when several of the men were asked later why they gave a voice vote, they didn't want her to speak but wouldn't raise their hand, they said they were afraid of the women in the audience. And so they weren't brave enough to raise their hand to say no. So a little bit of peer pressure worked there.
I don't know if it was just coincidence or if she planned it, but the more I read about it, the more I think that she may have planned it a little. I wouldn't be overly surprised.
As Frances Griffin was concluding her speech, she draws the differences between men and women. And she explains to the delegates that as men, they could not understand the perspectives of women. Only women could do that. And that is why women needed to be able to have a vote to express their perspectives. In many ways, in 1901, what Frances Griffin was talking about was the diversity of perspective, and that makes her a real trailblazer.
But Frances made some important points that were well remembered, and she was respected for the power with which she delivered those comments and the courage that it illustrates to stand up for your rights and to argue for the extension of suffrage to women as well as men in our society. It took a lot of courage for Frances Griffin to do that.
The sculpture looks nothing like this drawing, nothing at all. Couldn't sculpt all of this. It was just too much to sculpt. So I focused more on her speaking because that was the most important part of the event.
It's fascinating to me that in the artwork she is standing there with her hand out because she's having to ask men to give women the right to vote. Even if they put it before a ballot for the voters, all the voters are men, right? So she is literally having to ask basically for a handout to vote. And so I love that the artist depicted it that way.
I think if Frances Griffin could see how much progress our state has made in electing women in all seats of government, including our highest office as governor, she would be so thrilled. She would also know that we shouldn't stop, that our state is better when all voices are heard.